And welcome to the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. Rob Reigns, Mike Reigns here on STLSportsPage.com. Another edition of our program, thanks in part to our good friends at Archwell Health, as well as the Drury Hotels, AAA Travel of Missouri. We appreciate all of their sponsorship here on the podcast, as well as for all of our Cardinal coverage on STLSportsPage.com. Mike, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Kind of a quiet week for the Cardinals here as we hit in the early part of November. Not a lot going on the baseball calendar. Kind of a in-between week. Next week, a lot of stuff happens. The 40-man roster deadline is set. You're going to get all the award announcements next week with the MVP, the Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, Manager of the Year, all those announcements coming next week. But I think the primary order of business for the Cardinals' next official duties is to set that 40-man roster, and they've got a couple of decisions to make. They currently have 36 players on the 40-man roster, so they have some openings. We do know that obviously two guys who are going to be protected before that deadline will be the young pitchers, Tink Hence and Takeo Roby.
Yeah, definitely need to take care of that and try to figure out what's going on in those scenarios. Like you'd mentioned before, when you lose Kyle Gibson, Lance Lynn, and Kenyon Middleton, it opens up spots on the man that you don't have to make other adjustments there. So they've got some room. But I think the biggest thing for the Cardinals looking forward is just how do we answer some of these questions, right?
We broke up, but
I was just saying the biggest question mark for me is how do we answer some of these questions? And, you're going to have a couple spots open on the 40-man. You can add them, but how do we start to work forward to get answers to the questions of what do we decide to do with XYZ players as we move forward?
Yeah, I think, and I want to spend most of the time on the podcast today talking about that, but two other guys that I think will be interesting to watch to see if they end up getting added to the 40-man rosters are also pitchers. You got Andre Granello, who spent most of the season at AA Springfield, relief pitcher, and Ian Bedell, the former University of Missouri product, a little bit older player. I wouldn't be surprised if they have those two extra openings on the 40-man roster, that at least one of those guys gets added to that roster. Of course, anybody who's left off the 40-man roster who is not is draft 5 eligible. So at the winter meetings, there'll be the Rule 5 draft that they could lose a player or two through that draft at the winter meeting. So that's the whole purpose of the 40-man rosters, to protect those players. Obviously, one guy, the other kind of official piece of business that's wrapping up on Thursday is it's the final regular season game of the Arizona Fall League out in Arizona. The Cardinals have had 8 players be out there all year, and I think by and large have all done pretty well, but nobody has been better than Thomas Ajacey, and I don't think that's a surprise to everybody who's watched him play the last couple of years since he joined the organization, hitting .391 in that Fall League. And what do you say, Mike? He was second in the batting race right now and just has had a great fall on top of a very good, obviously not an MVP caliber season in the minor leagues regular season like he had in 2023, but I think still a very productive season, and showed well when he got the chance with the Cardinals at the end of September.
And one of the most productive things and the positive that I look for in his stats in the Fall League is he's got more walks than he does strikeouts. And that tells you you're seeing the ball well, your pitch selection's good, and that's a huge key to having success in the big leagues too. And so, as we've said many times in this show before, is that take advantage of the opportunity that you have, right? Force the Cardinals' hand. And, you look at somebody like Michael Ciani, and that's what he did last year, right? He made the Cardinals play him, and that's what Alec Burleson has done. So JC is certainly working his way into that role of what do the Cardinals do with Nolan Arenado?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of where I wanted to get to is if the whole, what we've been told and what the kind of official party line for the Cardinals have been this fall is the whole reset, and now they're going to go, with younger players in 2025 and give them a chance to play. Well, obviously, Thomas Ajacey is very much a guy that you look at and say he deserves a chance to play, but where is he going to play? And I think you've got 4 guys really, if you kind of talk about the whole kind of structure of the Cardinal organization, that there's 4 players who have a no trade contract in their contract, no trade clause in their contract. One of them is Wilson Contreras, who has already said that he doesn't want to waive that clause. He wants to be in St. Louis, and they've already made plans that they're going to play him primarily at first base and DH in 2025. The other one's Sonny Gray. Of course, he's also has not officially said it, but all indications from what we've seen reported in the media is that he intends to stay and honor his contract as well. So that leaves two players. One is Nolan Arenado. Miles Michaels is the second. I think those 2 guys right now hold the key to this whole reset thing, and if it's going to work or not. Because if it's going to work, they have to find a way to trade both those guys.
And what's interesting is Mo had mentioned before that he was going to sit down and talk with all 4 of them and try to gauge their input of whether they want to be a part of this rebuild or not, right? He was going to let them kind of have that say, so to speak. And Arenado becomes the biggest question mark because I think he wants to be on a team that wins, But I also think he really likes some of the guys on this team. He's become very close with Lars Nootbaar, very close with Pedro Pajes, and I think he wants to be here. I don't know that for sure. I haven't talked to him, so I can't say that answer, but I think he probably wants to be a part of this team. And so if he was to say, yes, I want to stay and be part of the rebuild, then it really changes the mindset of this club when you look at a reset, so to speak, because you really don't have much room to play the young kids.
And I'm not even talking about the money part of the series. I mean, obviously that's part of it too. Is if you free up some of these veteran players, then you're hopefully freeing up some money that and they say they want to cut payroll and things like that. But I'm not even talking about the money part. I'm just talking about more of an opportunity to play, because if Arenado is here, he's going to play. And then you look at an infield of Contreras at first, either Gorman and Donovan at second, Wynn at short, Arenado at third. I mean, I think that would be your projected starting infield. No room for Sajacy, also no room for Alec Burleson.
And the question to ask is, who's going to give you more offense? A healthy Nolan Arenado or a healthy Thomas Sajacy? And that's right. If you look at the way Arenado played last year, you could say it's a question mark. But is Nolan Arenado capable of putting up an MVP caliber year? It's possible. Will it happen? Remains to be seen.
And even if you move Donovan, say Donovan can play left field, well, then you say, okay, where's Nootbaar going to play in center? And then you got Walker and right. Then you're saying, okay, well, what about, Victor Scott II? What about Michael Ciani? And again, what about Alec Burleson? So they really have a lot of good young players, I think, that deserve a chance to play, but they're not going to get that chance unless you move out some of these older players.
And the other question to figure out is, like you just mentioned, Alec Burleson and Lucan Baker, first base, right? Because we've already said that Wilson Contreras is going to stay and be a part of this rebuild. So there's two guys right there that are potential candidates to, either one, take up a DH spot, or B, be traded. And if you say, okay, we want Burleson to stay and be our DH, well, then that leaves, like you said, somewhere you got to have room for Gorman and Donovan. Somewhere you got to have room for Victor Scott or Michael Ciani. Somewhere you got to have room for Jordan Walker. All these guys aren't going to fit here.
I mean, I do think that John Mozeliak and Chaim Bloom have got some tough decisions to make. And I'm not even talking about from the payroll standpoint, but just if you move Arenado, if you're going to have to eat part of the contract, but you maybe get a chance for a younger guy to play. But then you look at the rotation. I mean, if Michaelis is here, if Steven Matz is here, you're looking if Sonny Gray is here, you're looking as of right now, as we sit here on November the 14th, you could project a Cardinal starting rotation, and it's not a bad rotation. Sonny Gray, Eric Fetty, Miles Michaelis, Steven Matz, Andre Palante. But do you really want to go into 2025 with that as your starting rotation and not give, Michael McGreevy a chance, not give Gordon Graceffo a chance, not really have an opening for Tink Hence at some point, or, Quinn Matthews, or, maybe we'll see if Matthew Libator can start. And what about Zach Thompson, a former number one pick? You just kind of seem to have forgotten about. That's 7 guys right there who would be squeezed out of a job if you don't move a couple of those older starting pitchers.
Well, and I think the other thing you got to look at too is, okay, so they said they wanted to get younger, and part of that was in large due to having to cut budget, right? Well, as we've mentioned, they've already re-signed a new deal with FanDuel Sports Network, and so they've inked up that deal and know they're going to get paid at that point at some point. And we know they've got sports betting coming, which is going to help benefit them to some extent as well, right? Mm-hmm. So if they do nothing right now, they've already cut $50 million off their budget. And somewhere somebody's got to get traded, i.e. Lucan Baker or Alec Burleson, because there's just not enough room for these guys. Well, can one of those two turn into a better front-end starter for you, a 2 or a 3 type guy? If that happens, would you really call this a reset if Nolan Arenado's still here, Contreras is still here, you've still got some of the big names and big bats?
I would not call it a reset at all. You got the same guys.
That's a team that could probably contend for a playoff spot, though, in this division, right?
And the other guy, of course, where what's the future going to be for Ryan Helsley? That's also a question that they're going to have to decide.
And that's why, to me, it's all of this hinges on Nolan Arenado. Because if they think he's the guy they want to keep there and they want to push hard with it, they can build around him and go from there. But then you got to spend some money to find some pitching somewhere, because you can't go into this. Not that Andre Palante didn't do a lot for us this season and got us through a lot of things. To me, he doesn't project as a long-term starter.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, I even almost think you could look at a guy like Palante and Michael Ciani. I mean, I would think that Alec Burleson, their trade value right now is probably as high as it's ever going to be. So, okay, yeah, maybe it might not necessarily fit into your financial structure because they don't make a lot of money, any of those guys, but maybe it's the time to look at trading somebody like that too.
I'll give you an interesting trade candidate that just popped up the other day. And the Arizona Diamondbacks said they want to eat a lot of his contract because they want to trade him, is Jordan Montgomery.
Mhm.
Would the Cardinals be willing to take a shot on him to see if they can get him back to the Montgomery that he was before? Now, last year he did not have it together and did not look very good. But if the Diamondbacks eat a lot of that contract,
Or
is
if you
that
can offset, if you can trade one of your guys that makes a lot of money to kind of offset that contract, so you're not really bringing
yeah?
on salary.
And maybe somebody like Jordan Montgomery for Miles Michaelis, maybe they'd be willing to make a trade like that to swap something out and just see if you can get something different out of it, right?
Yeah. It will be interesting. Of course, the winter meetings come up early December. That's generally about the time as you see some of the major free agents kind of start to sign, and then once the free agent market kind of fills out a little bit, then some of the trade talks follow that. We know there's going to be interest in Ryan Helsley. The Cardinals at this point haven't said for sure that they're going to trade him. He's another guy that if you want to have a reset and can bring in two or three really good young players, possibly he's the guy you look at. But with just too much of this was just we have to wait and see because we just don't know the answers to this yet.
And are you trying to build a team that's competitive for this year, or are you trying to build a team that may not necessarily win this year, but they'll be fun to watch, but we know they'll be really good in year 2 and 3 from now? That's the question that Mo has to decide right now and that Heim has to decide.
I would think you want a team that's going to be good in 26 and 27 with some of these because you got some of this young talent coming up through the organization.
But I think when you look at this division, nobody's out far and ahead, so there's no reason to say with the team you have right now you couldn't win this division.
Well, that's correct too. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously in a perfect world you want both. You want a team that can get. You want a team that's going to be less expensive, that has good young players, that also still has a chance to win. I mean, I think that's what you get because you got a couple of these guys. Michaelis's contract is up after next year. Steven Matz's contract is up after next year. After next year, you only have 2 years left of Contreras' deal and only 2 years left of Arenado's deal. So those contracts will run out at some point. And the closer you get toward the end of them, the easier it might be to move some of those guys. You're not talking about trading as much money.
And I would think it's probably easier from the Cardinals standpoint to trade Michaelis and Matz this year because they only have 1 year left on their contract. The question mark is Arenado because he didn't play very well last year. So is there much stock in him because he's Nolan Arenado? Or do you want him to play the first half of the season and trade him at the deadline because he's having a good year and people see that he's capable of helping their team?
I mean, it's kind of a 50-50 proposition because you don't know how he's going to play. If you know he's going to play well, then you'd have a better chance of moving him at the deadline. If you, in fact, then decide you want to move him, if you're in the race, you probably don't. And you could make the same argument with Helsley. Would you get more in terms of value right now because somebody knows they're going to have him for the entire season before he hits free agency? Or there'll be such a demand for him at the trading deadline if he's pitching so well again as he did this year that you could get more for him at the trading deadline. It's a gamble. You never know.
But at this point in time, right, there's no reason that I would want to go into this season with Michaelis or Matz in the starting rotation. So I would try to find a way to trade both of them this offseason. Now, if that means you have to package one of these other guys with it, okay, maybe that happens. But maybe that's where you look at a Lucan Baker or Alec Burleson. Would somebody take Michaelis and Burleson for whoever? I don't know. But, maybe that helps get you a number 2 or number 3 starter back in.
Correct. Yeah, that's. I think that's what the Cardinals are going to have to weigh as they go through the next couple of months to decide some of these things. We're also still waiting on the announcements. I thought actually we'd have some announcements by now about Rob Cerfolio and Chaim Bloom's first hires as far as the new farm director is concerned, as far as the director of performance, which you're going to be hiring, and then filling in all the gaps with the minor league managers, coordinators, things like that. So still expecting that to be happening sooner rather than later. I know they were doing interviews at the general managers meetings, so still waiting for those announcements, kind of how that reshape of the minor league system is going to get started with.
And we'll hear some more news as it progresses here, and as you mentioned before, when we get to the winter meetings, we'll start to see a lot more shakeup. So, maybe a slower week this week, but there will certainly be news coming soon.
We do know the news we know is that when they make the award announcements next week, there really won't be need to pay attention to the announcements as far as the Cardinal standpoint is concerned because the MVP, Cy Young, and Manager of the Year and Rookie of the Year, the finalists were all announced, and no Cardinals among those. I was hopeful that maybe Mason Wynn would be a finalist for the Rookie of the Year award, but you can't really argue with the three guys that they picked, and Jackson Churio, Paul Skeens, and Jackson Merrill.
And if I had to guess, he probably finished fourth. I mean, he was right there and certainly competitive in that area. But yeah, you would have hoped he would have been a finalist, but you can't argue that he was better than those three.
No, I don't think so either. So doesn't take away from the fact he had a really good, terrific rookie season, and it's going to be a guy the Cardinals will be building this team around for a long time. Do want to say, speaking of the last week, that we want to appreciate everybody who came out to the Rainbows for Kids trivia night last Friday night. Had a great, successful event, raised a lot of money for Rainbows for Kids, our children's charity. There's a good look at the room at Royal Orleans, so we really appreciate everybody who came out. I think everybody had a good time, and everybody involved. Brad Thompson was the MC for the evening, did a great job. Heard nothing but praise for his performance for everybody who was at the event. So a big shout out to all the volunteers and all the workers who made it happen. So appreciate everybody's support, and very successful event. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thanks everybody for the support. That really went well, and thanks.
Cardinals have set the dates for the winter warm-up. That also was announced this week, January 18th through the 20th. Caravans going on that weekend around the Midwest as well. So obviously that's always a kind of kickoff to the next season as well. So the question will be who's on the roster at that point when they hit to the winter warm-up. What decisions have they made by then?
And again, there are probably 15 different directions this club could go right now. They could go all young and trade everybody. They could be content with the team that they have and just roll forward like it is, or they could just move one or two pieces and see if that's enough to make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's what we're all kind of waiting to see. Don't forget, of course, as well, as you're making your Christmas plans, to also think about the Homewood Suites Hotel down in Jupiter, Florida. We'll have our party on March the 11th. Some great spring training rates, rooms available now. So, weather's going to start getting cold and damp and maybe dreary here in St. Louis. So don't think about to start thinking about spring training not that far away. So be sure to kind of look into your calendars and see if you can make it work to come down and join us in Florida. Not even if you can't make it down on March 11th for our get together, at least come down at some point during February and March, because it's always a great time. So anything else on your radar that you're looking for to try to see from the Cardinals, Mike?
I think we'll get the answers here pretty soon as we start to make decisions, because I would think that if we're going to trade some of these bigger players, it's going to be done prior to spring training, right? So prior to February. So I would think you've really got 2 months essentially that if something's going to happen, it would happen within that time frame.
Well, we'll be watching, paying attention. We appreciate everybody who tunes into our podcast. You can get it wherever you can get all of your podcasts, on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, iHeartRadio, all of those, your normal places. So check it out there as well. We try to come with you with a new edition every week to kind of catch up on what's going on with the Cardinals. And as we say, some weeks there's more news than others, but there will be news here at some point during this off season. It won't be quiet forever. So, Mike, thanks for the visit. Have a good weekend. Thanks to everybody for tuning in here on the Reigns of the Cardinals podcast. We'll talk to you again soon here on STLSportsPage.com.